Welcome everyone to another episode of the Khalis podcast, a platform to share the work and thoughts of both aspiring and established writers, poets and artists who are passionate about preserving and furthering Sikh and Punjabi heritage and identity. Today I am joined by Erenjit Kaur, author of the brand new children's book Finding Your Inner Power, which we'll go into shortly. Erenjit Kaur is a mom of two and an advocate for young people. She is a youth coach empowering young people, families, and local communities on the importance of emotional and mental well-being. Having worked with young people for nearly 20 years, her mission is to encourage young people to find their voice and their inner strength. Inspired by her faith and her children, she takes us through a journey of self-belief throughout this book, which we'll go into in just a moment. But firstly, Erenjit Kaur, or Eren Penji, welcome to the Khalis podcast. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me. So we'll get straight into the podcast. I thought we'd start by asking you a little bit about your background and how your kind of work in terms of your coaching work, how that began, and then how you came into this line of writing and producing this children's book, which obviously we'll be going into shortly as well.
Yes, sure. Yes, so I've worked with young people for over nearly 20 years now. It came quite naturally. I was told by my careers advisor that the best thing for me to do in my career would be to work with young people. So my experience of working with young people started in a Sikh youth forum back in Birmingham, where I was setting up projects for young people. And I just found real enjoyment about seeing young people engage in positive activities and just kind of finding themselves. And so my journey's been very long in terms of where I've worked, been to university, studied youth and community development. And so again, I've always found a passion for instead of just working with young people, but working in the wider community and just building that engagement, building that connection. And then my work, once I got married and had children, worked in schools and, engaging young people in English, in storytelling, in being creative. It just kind of led from there, and then seeing young people through kind of things that we experienced through lockdown, COVID, seeing young people's emotional and mental development, I suppose, kind of decrease or just not be visible. I found that there's a real need just to focus more on, like I said, children's emotional and mental health rather than the academic side of things. Academically, I saw children still being able to cope, being able to manage, and they had that support. But yeah, I wanted to be that person that was there to support them with their voice, and just to be that space where they could come to and just to be able to talk and express themselves. So then I went into coaching. I coach young people, so I'm a youth coach. I specialize coaching with young people, families, and just like you said, just empowering young people to have a voice, to find their own confidence. Because as a young person, yes, they have that nurturing support within the family, extended family, schools. But as we go into adult life, we become more independent. We face more challenges in life. Something that I experienced is that sometimes we're not very well equipped with life challenges. And that can obviously be, a cause for further mental health issues. And so for me, it's about getting young people at an early age, getting them conversations out there about, why am I an amazing person as a young person? Why do I stand out? What makes me special? How can I then help people around me? How can I help myself?
Yeah.
And I suppose that's where this book's come into it. It's about, people having them conversations with young people and young people realizing just how important and special they are, so that when they enter adulthood, when life challenges do knock them down, they've got that self-belief to be able to get back up again. Yeah. I believe once we have confidence and once we have self-belief, we're unstoppable. And that's how I want young people to feel.
Yeah, awesome. And when you say kind of young people, are we talking about different age groups or
anyone from the age from 18 under 18? I've worked with university students where I've worked with confidence building. And again, university students are most vulnerable because stress, the pressure, and they're entering that stage of adulthood. They're by themselves, whether they're living out, if they're living at home, they're still experiencing adult life for the first time. And so, yeah, and it's just about reassuring them that they're on the right path. And if they're not, guiding them to how they can get back to basics. And it's an incredible journey that I've been on this last 3 years. And the young people that I've met are all so incredible. And I'm just looking forward to seeing their future and what they become as adults.
Yeah, awesome. You mentioned there obviously lockdown and the impact of that, not I guess not just on children, young people, but also on adults, right? We all kind of
Yeah, yeah.
felt it. So was there a particular moment during that period where you felt drawn towards this? Was it something happen, or is it something that's just kind of you've experienced within your own family perhaps and seen
Yeah. So
what's going on around you?
with the coaching, it was definitely a moment while working in a school where I could
Right,
just see young people just blank in terms of socially when they were out in the playground as well. Their communication skills weren't necessarily there. Being able
right.
to solve conflict, being able to, be in a friend circle and just voice their opinions. They weren't able to do that because lockdown made sure that we were locked in and we weren't communicating, we weren't connecting with people. When we're not
Yeah,
connected, we don't feel a sense of belonging, we don't feel a sense of safety, nurturing. And, coming from a community where connection is a big part of us, like,
yeah,
not being able to go to the God, there was just a sense of
yeah.
not a community. And so I could really see young people in the classroom and outside the classroom really
Right.
struggling. And there was that moment where I just like, I can't sit here in a lesson
Hmm.
teaching English and maths when we're out in the playground, when we're socializing, when we're connecting, we're not able to do that.
Right,
Um,
right.
yes, academic, is an important part of life, but
Yeah,
we can only be well educated if we have the basics, and that's obviously being a good human and having that ability to connect to other people. So that's
yeah.
something that I really enforce and encourage while I'm coaching young people.
Okay, okay, awesome. Coming on to the book then, so was that something that you thought about at that time, or has it kind of just naturally just emerged through your work in terms of coaching and empowering young people?
Yes, I know we've had brief conversations about
Yeah,
this when I first introduced my book to you. I had no intention of writing a book, a children's book. So I've
right,
written a journal for young people around coaching. So the coaching techniques that I use, I decided to write a journal just because I realized I was one person. There's so many young people. There's going to be young people that aren't going to be able to be coached. So for me, it was about providing a journal for young people so they can coach themselves and have the techniques and be empowered. I had no intention for writing a children's book. Yes, I love English. I love reading. I love books. I love delving into a world where isn't necessarily yours. But yeah, there's no intention of me ever writing a book. This came about 2 years ago. I had gone to the first time I'd gone to Versace in Trafalgar Square,
right,
and being surrounded by the community. I was volunteering at a stall for children, creating crafts. And I came home. Kids were absolutely exhausted. I was exhausted. So we were just, lazing around on the sofa and
sure,
just, I just reflected on the day and just, there's a lot of empowerment coming through and just a lot of being proud and that strength and the courage that I had collected from the song. And there was just something inside and I quickly got my phone. I went to the notes section
yeah,
and literally I just wrote this story. And initially I wrote this story thinking when I'm doing my coaching sessions, I can read this story and it can
yeah,
lead to conversations. And so
sure,
there was no thought in my head like, oh, I could get illustrations with this. I can get this printed. It was like, let me write this down. Let me read this to the young people that I'm working with and see
yeah,
what kind of conversations stem
hmm,
from it. Um, so I wrote that. I read it to the kids and they were like, did you just write that? And I was like, yeah, I literally just wrote this
yeah,
right now. Like, I'm so
yeah,
excited.
yeah,
And then I left it to the side. And then my sister, she is into art. And during that time, she was painting a lot.
right,
I commissioned her to paint some pictures that we've got at home. And I just showed her the book and I said, would you like to draw some pictures like for this book?
yeah,
And she took her time. And my kids kept saying to her, like, Mussy, you haven't done the pictures. And
yeah,
it did
yeah,
take her quite a while. And I was just like, are you going to do this or not?
yeah,
She did it. And I was working at the time and I had literally just left the pictures on the top of my shelf. And
right,
again, the kids are like, Mummy, you've been, moaning at Mossy that she hasn't done the pictures. Now the
yeah,
pictures are done. Now you haven't done anything.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then January this year, I reached out to you and I was just like, what I'm just going to do? I'm just going to see where this goes. I have
yeah,
no
yeah,
intention. I don't know what to expect.
uh-huh,
But
uh-huh,
let's just see what happens. And
Yeah.
The process that, you made such an easy process. It
Yeah.
was impossible for me to back down and say, actually, I'm not going to go ahead with this.
Yeah. Yeah. But kids are really good at that, aren't they? They're really good at like pushing you and reminding you because in their minds, to them it's a very simple thing that you said you're going to write a book or Marcy's going to draw some pictures. Why
Yeah.
is it not happening? So in a good way, I guess they give us that kind of kick to
They
get
made
to
me
get that.
accountable.
Yeah,
They
exactly. Yeah.
And there were times where I was like, I wish I never said this. I never wish I never read the book
Yeah.
because now I have to do it. And
Yeah.
that's why, again, I love working with young people because my children personally, since I've had my children, my personal growth, my spiritual growth has grown so much. And
Mm,
I've learned so much from them. I believe that that the young people are the teachers because
mm,
they're so genuine, they're so pure. And as adults, we kind of, we have so many other layers. We've been conditioned quite a lot, whereas young people are
yeah,
just pure. They just see it how it is. And that's why
absolutely.
I feel sometimes I work better. I can communicate better with young people rather than adults.
Yeah,
Hence why I'm a youth worker,
for
youth
sure.
coach. But it's definitely been my children. And I think, again, writing this book is just a way of me saying thank you to my own children and just young people in general and kind of giving a little bit back to them.
Yeah.
They've helped my confidence, and now I feel like it's my turn to return that and support young people with their confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. So this book obviously is aimed at younger children. Was there a point where you decided that you'd focus specifically on the younger readership rather than maybe young persons, maybe like teenagers? And was there any kind of reason for that?
Yeah, so I mean, even though this book is targeted at, I suppose, a younger age, kind of like the key stage ones, so like reception, year
Sure.
ones and year twos, which is ideal for them. But I actually, every time I read, and I know it's my book, but every time I read the book that I've written, I still learn something.
Yeah.
So I have children, like I have an 8-year-old, and he likes reading the book as well. So I do believe, and I use books for my coaching. So I use the books that I use for young people, I actually read it sometimes to adults. And I always say to adults, yes, it's a children's book, but the way the message behind it is so powerful.
Yeah.
And sometimes the more basic things are, the more simple things are, the more we can understand. So yes, it's for young people, but there's no reason why a college student, a university student, or parent can't pick up the book and read it and just go back into their own childhood and go back into their own self-belief and
Sure.
just remind themselves. But again, there was no intention. It was just kind of what'd come out.
Right.
I like to follow my intuition, and so I really go with what I feel. Um, and again, there was no intention to set this book at a certain target audience. It was just, this is the kind of I want to start conversations. I want to start that early sense of who am I? Why am I amazing? And books are just a great tool for young people just to get that message across, but in a child-friendly way.
Yeah.
So like I said, the journal that I have is more, I would say, like year 4 upwards.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there was a gap for me. I was like, well, I work with young people, and that's across the age groups. And so, yeah, this would be ideal for the younger ones to then this their them seeds are being planted about confidence. And so when they reach year 4, they can
Yeah.
go on to their more meaningful, like doing the journal or doing coaching sessions, because there's no reason why confidence and self-belief can't start at an early age. It should be starting as soon as a young child is born. It's about the words that we use, the energy that we give them, about, just them being amazing and special.
I think especially so like in today's day and age where increasingly I'm seeing that children are gaining access to a lot more information, whether that's on kind of on TV or YouTube or like some children have access to social media and obviously it's a lot of kind of stimulation, right?
What to
And
take?
I think what you've done with the book is you've kind of taken it back to basics by showing that actually I don't want to give the book away, but showing that what we perhaps crave on TV or in like mainstream or whatever, the answer kind of lies within us if we kind of just allow ourselves that kind of space and look inward, right? So these
Yeah,
this key kind of values and I guess characteristics that we have of hope and love and that inner strength, and that's what I really liked about the book because even like with my kids, right? So I've got 4 kids, and they all love like the Marvel superheroes.
mm,
They're into all the kind of the mainstream stuff. But when my older two, who are 11 and 10, when they were reading this book, they were kind of, their reaction was the same. Like, Papa, this is really good, and
Yeah.
it made them kind of think twice, because often I think we can kind of skim over those basic attributes that we all have, and we forget, because again, we're living in this world where there's that sense of kind of all that stimulation, all that instant kind of gratification that people are so, craving all the time. But just to slow it down a little bit, and I like how it's, obviously I'm going to say this because I'm an author and editor, but I like how you produced it within a book, because the other thing I was going to ask you about was, in this age of artificial intelligence and animation, um, how important do you think it is to write a book and read a book, you know, uh, together as a family, especially one that is speaking about such empowering things that you do within this book? Because what that allows us to do is, it allows you to sit as a family, right? Or perhaps sit with other older siblings, or maybe even grandparents. And I think sometimes with other mediums of storytelling, you kind of lose that. But how important is that for you in terms of the art of storytelling through a book?
Yeah, I think just going back to what you said before about, you know, there's so much out there for young people, and sometimes, and when I say young people, I mean, like, children. I'm taking it from like early years to kind of more the older age as well. But when I'm talking about young children, young people, and then you were saying about how they're exposed to so much in terms of
Yeah,
media and TV, and that's something that I think we've related to quite a lot. But even with my children, um, again, we never exposed my daughter to like things like princesses and Barbie. She naturally just we never used to watch things like that. Used to just be like baby TV, the basics of just like children's things. And
mm,
naturally she just became known to Barbie and princesses. We were
yeah,
like, okay, so this is something that you like. Let's just follow it. Let's just take it. So she started watching it. Um, and she was referring to herself a lot with like, oh, I mean, I call her princess. She is a princess. She's a core. Um,
yeah,
but she wasn't referring to herself as a core princess. She was referring to herself as a princess she sees on TV. And
yeah,
me,
yeah,
it was like, you're not that princess in TV. You are your own princess. You are a
yeah,
core. And
yeah,
so, and I remember getting her, Castle Toys have got the figures as well. So we
yeah,
purchased that, but she would always put them to the side and pick up her own princess. And I'm like, this is not us. This is not what we,
yeah,
we're not represented in that.
sure.
Um, so I had to hold back. So I was just like, I need you to go on your own journey and figure
Yeah, of
that
course,
out.
of course.
But so it's little things like that. And again, the kids going into Marvel, we took them to Universal Studios when we were in Abu Dhabi, and they were just amazed by all these
Yeah,
superpowers and the
yeah,
rides that they were experiencing. But I was just like, but this isn't real. And sometimes they'll ask on TV, but oh, how did that happen? How does this happen? And we have to have them constant conversations about what we see on TV. It's not real. Oh, but these people are real. Yeah, the people are real, but they're acting.
yeah. But they're
And
acting.
so
Yeah,
they train to do this and they have to perform to do this. And this isn't us. This isn't like step out of the TV. It's not real. Um, and I'm lucky enough, blessed enough that my children go to a school where values are really enforced in terms of in their education, in their real life. So
yeah,
it's been quite easy to be able to incorporate values in our household. My daughter was having a conversation the other day about, if how like if she was talking about Guru Nanak Dev Ji and saying Guru Nanak Dev Ji came from a family of Hindus, and how then are we Sikh? And I was saying, before anything, before being Hindu, before being Christian, Sikh, Muslim, Guru Nanak Dev Ji taught us about being human. And being human means, being a good person, like showing kindness, having hope, being, showing your bravery. And she was just like, oh, so it's really important to be a good human. I'm like, yes, before
mhm,
anything else, it's so important to be a good human. And then,
mhm,
we have them conversations like, what is being a good human? And again, it's about bringing in them values. And so when you say about basics, that is the basics of any life. It's just about being a good human. And so that's really something that I really wanted to incorporate in the book. In terms of why is that important in a version of a book, is just because it creates that connection.
yeah,
The reason why I decided to when I say put my kids in the book, I mean the pictures in the book can relate to any young person, and particularly any young person who is a thing and a core. And so what was really interesting was my daughter took the book into her class, so the teacher to read, and
right,
the teacher was saying that she was having that then led to conversation. So she asked every child to go home and think about what superpower without again telling the book too
Wow.
much. But
Okay.
the teacher then said to every young person, so 27 young people, go back and think about your own superpowers.
Right.
Um, and she was saying some of the young people were asking like, who's who in the book?
Right.
And I said to the teacher, I was like, I hope you said that that girl and boy in the book could be any one of them 27 children. They are in that book. They can then figure out their own superpower because every young person shows kindness. But again, like you said, there's so many other stuff going on that we forget. We forget that we are kind and we forget how important it is to show kindness and what that
Yeah.
means for the bigger world.
Yeah.
And so again, for families to have that book in their hand and for certain individuals, like for kids to be able to relate to themselves in that book and be like, oh, actually, I hug my brother when he's upset, or when I see my sister struggling, I help my sister. And then they realize that actually what the values that they hold are so much more important than being, a certain character that they see on TV because it's actually affecting them, it's affecting the people that they're around. Um, so for me, again, it's so important to have this in a book because it's something that you can physically hold. You can have them conversations because we're in that moment. It's creating, again, that connection. It's bringing things to life and values we all hold. Whether you are a real superhero or whether you're not, we all hold values. As a human, we hold a value, but we forget, like you just said, we forget the basics of life. And this book is just aimed to bring them values back into basics, back into to being human. That
Yeah.
makes any sense, I hope.
Absolutely. I think it's amazing how, the children were able to take the book into school and the teachers, giving them an exercise based on the book. And it shows you how maybe further resources can be produced, I guess, for school teachers
Yes.
or generally schools. Not just sick schools, but this is, as you said, this relates to everyone, right? It's not just, although the main protagonist and the characters are sick, what you're speaking about in terms of the values, they do relate to everyone. So I think
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. And I had a parent actually send a video to me of how she was reading her children and her child actually made a comment saying, well, I don't have any superpowers. And the mom was like, but you do. And she was like, no, I don't though. I can't blow bubbles. I can't do this. But she was like,
Yeah.
the mom was like, but your superpowers are different. Like you show
Mm.
kindness, don't you? And the daughter was like,
Mhm.
yeah. And so mom was
Yeah.
like, but then you have a superpower. Your superpower is kindness. And again, it's changing young people's thought processes.
Sure.
Like I said, what is the real power?
Yeah.
Because yes, we all have kindness, but in this world, is it easy to show kindness? Sometimes it's not, but if you can show kindness in them difficult times, that is power. If
Yeah.
you can show strength when you're scared, that is power. And we forget that, and we forget to teach children just how important it is to have them values.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Kindness is just that, it has the ability to uplift somebody, and if that's not a superpower, I don't know what is, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
as you said earlier, it's taking, the children away in terms of changing their kind of thought process from looking outward at these kind of make-believe superheroes that we see on TV, which we all watch, and it's great entertainment.
yeah,
Um, but actually making it about the real life and not kind of wrapping them in cotton wool and actually exposing them to what the world is like. And if you
yeah.
embody these values, then they'll help you in life.
Yeah.
Um, the other question I had was regards to like as a parent. Um, Obviously you've said at the beginning you like reading books. You've now written a book. What kind of advice or tips would you have for other parents who are perhaps watching or listening into the podcast who maybe struggle to read with children, or especially again, I mean, I can certainly relate to this as well, because that kids have access to iPads and tablets and
Yeah.
TV. That's going to be their first port of call, and a book almost kind of becomes a bit boring. So how do you think as a writer now? How do we kind of change that? What can parents do to um, get their children reading more?
So we do this thing, and again, we've done it from when they were literally born, where we do story time at night time. And rather
Right.
than as a parent, us choosing a book, or sometimes we take it in turns, but I say to the children, like, pick a book each.
Yeah.
And sometimes we
Okay.
have arguments
Yeah.
because there's two of them, they and a boy and a girl, and so they have different interests, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh well, one wants to read the other. So we actually say to them, like, one night we'll read this book, and then the other night
Yeah.
we'll read this book, and then another night mummy's gonna choose. So again, we're showing virtues and values, but also it's about them taking ownership. Sometimes I might not want to read the book that my daughter wants to pick. Like she likes to read like the practical books where you tickle each other and but it's like, okay, but I want you to, this is story. I think reading books are so much more than just a book. It's
Yeah.
about that, again, for me, connection is a big thing. And reading books are all about connecting and about having them conversations. Any book that we read and we ask questions, I ask questions like, what would you do in this situation? Or what do you think about that? Again,
Yeah.
it's engaging them, it's making that book become a reality.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and so I found that that really works with my children is just getting them to have ownership on what books are we going to read. You choose.
Yeah.
I was struggling with my son until till year three, where he just didn't enjoy reading. So we always done this thing where every day it's 15, 20 minutes of reading. Um, from reception to year three, he just did not want to. It was always a real battle getting him to
Right.
read. I remember speaking to the teacher and saying like I just don't think he likes reading. Like I
Yeah.
feel really bad because I don't feel like I'm a good parent because my child doesn't
Yeah.
read. We're
Yeah.
told get your children to read.
Of
She
course.
was
Of
saying,
course.
what kind of books are you getting him to read? And I was like, well, he's got a younger sister, so we read lots of the baby books. And she was like, well, then do you blame him? Like he's not probably not
Yeah.
interested in them books. She was like,
Sure.
what's he interested in? And I was like, football. She was like, well, then get him to read football books.
Mm,
She's
mm.
like, really? And she's like, get him to go, take him to a bookshop and get him to choose a
Yeah.
book. Find out what he enjoys doing, find out what he enjoys reading. And
Yeah.
now him himself is asking for a collection. Now he's in year four. So in the
Mm.
space of like a year, he's now asking for a collection of like Diary of the Wimpy Kid.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's got a collection, he's got a bookshelf, he's got loads of books, and he'll
Yeah.
read and he'll happily do a time. Like he does a timer every day. He comes like he'll do a 20-minute timer, he'll read, and sometimes at night time he'll read. And when I look at him, I just feel like a sense of, oh my God, like, oh, it's amazing to see you pick up a book and delve into that imaginary world, that creative
Hmm.
world.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's just done because it's just I've let the children lead in
Yeah.
terms of what books they want to read. And again, if we're going on to intuition about what feels right for you, when we do that, it makes us feel good and we
Hmm.
naturally do things.
Yeah.
And they see me, I have loads of books on my bookshelf and they're like, Mummy, never see you read a book. And I'm like,
Yeah.
because I read a book and then I don't finish it. I was like, that's a struggle for me. I'd never
Oh,
finish a book unless it's a
yeah.
children's book, actually. Children's books
Right.
I can read all the time, or that this is a
Yeah.
book that really means something, I'll finish it.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I explain my challenges of reading and what
Yeah.
I enjoy reading, what I don't enjoy reading. And so it's about, again, having them conversations, open conversations with our young
Hmm.
people,
Yeah.
for them to really figure out who they are, what they like. Um, so yeah, definitely take lead from the young person. And again, as a parent, we always want our children to go down a certain path, like
Hmm.
to read certain books or be at a certain age where they're reading a certain level. And it doesn't always work because children are very different and they're
Yeah.
all unique. And so it's really about understanding your own child, getting your child to understand themselves, and
Yeah.
just really leading on from that.
Yeah.
Once they start enjoying something, you won't be able to stop them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we're the same as well, right? Like even like as parents or as adults, we'll read something that we're genuinely interested in. If we're
Yeah,
forced to read something that we have no interest in, then we'll just switch off. And I
yeah,
think it's the same with the kids. Like my youngest, he's into dinosaurs at the moment. Like he
yeah,
loves dinosaurs, right? So we just ordered dinosaur books, and although he's not reading yet,
exactly. Yeah,
he can't read, but he knows what like each specific dinosaur is, like the Stegosaurus, a Triceratops, because he's just learned that, right?
yeah,
um so again, it's giving them, like you said, one thing that they're interested in.
yeah,
And I think what I really liked about what you said was getting them to choose what they want to read,
yeah,
because you're empowering the individual as well, at that, the
yeah,
child at the same time. You're giving them that agency, right? That
yeah,
they're in control and they can. And obviously, we what we want out of it as parents is for them just to be reading, right? Because we know it
yes,
generally reading is a good thing to be doing. So I think that's some really really good
yeah.
advice. With regards to your book, then, what are your kind of hopes now that it's out? It's out. It's been out for, well, it came out yesterday on the 18th of April. Um, what are your hopes with this book?
Um, I want it to be worldwide. And
Yeah.
also I was just thinking before, like, um, when I mean, I'm not a regular customer at bookshops, I don't go weekly, but when I have been, I don't see any representation of of the Sikh community, the Sikh individuals in books. And maybe I'm not looking in the right place, or maybe I just don't go very often. But I don't, or if I do, it's very minimal. And so if I'm not seeing it, other people won't see it. And for me, it's not about we need a space on the shelves. It's a question of, well, why not? Why are we not? Like, why can't we? Why should we be stopped? And so for me, it's about, okay, yes, this book is able to be accessed through Khalis website, but why can't we take this further? Why can't we put this in bookstores? What's stopping us? And so for me, I'd love to work with yourself and just to take this further, and for other authors to be able to just be like, yeah, let's just push this out. Let's just get out of our comfort zone and take this further, get a wider community to read these books.
Yeah.
But small steps for me is just my aim, my hope for this book is that it just starts some conversations. For every household that has this book, for every school that's going to kind of commit to getting these books, it's about what we are committing to, not just having the book or to supporting authors and publishers. It's about a commitment to making sure that we are creating a space for young people, just to go back again, like I said, to basics. Yes, it's great to want to be a doctor, to be an author, to be a footballer, but before that, we have to be good people. We have to be better. And so to create them conversations where we're talking to young people about what makes you special and what skills have you got to make the world a better place, or just the environment around you, the family space better. So yeah, I just want every young person to grow up knowing and seeing just how special they are. And like I always say to my kids, oh, you're so amazing. Or, if I had to choose which child I would want, I would choose you. But for my kids, they're like, but mummy, you would say that because you're our mum.
Yeah.
I don't want them to think that. I want them to be like, actually, yeah, you would, because I'm amazing. Of course you'd want to choose me. You'd be silly not to choose me as a child.
Sure.
So that's, yeah. And so when we have that as children, when they grow up to become adults, there'll be less mental health concerns. There'll be, less support needed for them adults because they've already nurtured. And that might be a big goal for one book, but there's a bunch of books out there that create that. And so it's about parents. When I do my coaching, I'm really selective with what books I use with young people. I use the books that are going to create them conversations, that are going to create empowerment, that are going to create confidence. And so what I would say as a parent is that, yes, get your children to read, but as a parent as well, always in your head, always think about why you're choosing certain books for your children. What message do you want to create? What conversation are you going to create with your children? I only read books for my children that are going to create conversations. So yeah, that's what I hope. I hope conversations are created for this book, connections are made for this book, and confidence is built as well.
Yeah, awesome. I think confidence is such a huge part of it, because as you kind of alluded to, right, that's such an important part of like just a child growing up, having that confidence. And I think it's different. It's important to distinguish between like the ego. So, like sometimes, you said there, like, your child said, oh, well, you'd always pick me because, I'm your child, or, that, it's not an ego thing. It's just giving them the kind of the power to feel confident, because I think confidence is a massive thing, because, I think a confident child is a happy child. And they're then willing to learn and do more things. I think when they don't have that confidence, you can see, how kind of detrimental that can be, not just in the short term in terms of their kind of that year group or whatever, but long term as they go into adolescence and become young adults. So I think if one of the aims of the book is to instill that confidence, which I wholeheartedly agree with, I think it'll certainly do that. I think that's a really good thing.
And you mentioned about the ego as a parent as well. It's something I struggled with. My son naturally, and my daughter, they're naturally quite confident people. And sometimes when they used to talk to adults and young people, I used to kind of put my head down and be like, oh gosh, like just stop, because it's too confident. And I remember speaking to a parent and they were like, what do you mean too confident? How can you ever have a too confident child? And they were like, you should push that even more. And I'm like, here I am as a youth coach and I'm telling my own children, like, but again, then I had to really shift myself. I was like, it's not ego. And I had to obviously talk to your young people about that, about ego is when you think you're better than other people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas confidence is actually, I'm going to be better than myself than I was yesterday. And I'm going to be better so that I can make other people feel better. I can be better so that other people can see that they're better as well. Um, and again, it's about having this book allows them conversations to take place with our young people about the difference between that ego and that confidence. And so, yeah, definitely, I
So
definitely agree on that one.
yeah, I think the key difference is with confidence, it's basically them being like assured of themselves, so that no matter what's happening in the world around them, no matter what somebody says to them, again, the playgrounds can be, very quite a nasty place at times.
Yeah.
But if they're sure of themselves and who they are, and it's obviously in our case, they're Sikhi or whatever, then again they're going to be really well grounded, and
Yeah.
so they're not going to let anything that's around them, affect them. That's
Yeah.
kind of the
And that's another reason why I decided I could have just put a mainstream boy and a girl,
Mm.
the typical what you see in everyday books.
Yeah,
Um, but obviously, being from Sikh faith, being in the South Asian community, for me, it was really important and that's why I didn't add names to the characters. I didn't want
sure.
names. I didn't again want to exclude anyone. I wanted anyone that reads this book, especially from the Sikh community, for every young person to, even adult, to be like, yeah, that was me when I was younger, or that is me now. Like I can relate to that character, and the more we are seen and heard, the more we're going to be understood. But I mean, ideally, that's what you would like to happen. Um, and I see it a lot. I remember going to that time I wrote that book. I remember going to the Fasaki Trafalgar Square, and I remember people walking past me, and they had little comments like, "Oh, what is that? What's going on there? Oh, is it because of Eid celebrations?" I remember turning
Right.
around and I'm like, "Do these people not get it? Like, do they not
Yeah,
understand?" My
yeah,
husband was like, "But not everyone knows."
sure,
And it made me
sure.
reflect on myself because I was like, "Oh, actually, there's probably some other like religious activities that take place that I actually don't know about, and so I probably sound like that as well." And so for me, it's just about, I'm not from any other religion, I'm not from any background, I am who I am, and so
Yeah.
what I understand, I would like to put that across to other people so that again it does get seen and it does get heard. And so for anyone else who's thinking about writing a book, to show that representation, go for it, because like I said, the more we are seen, the more we are heard, easier it is for our children to be seen and heard. And also the easier it is for our community to be understood. And I think more than ever, that's what we need right now.
Mhm. In terms of this book, so obviously, I know we've spoken about how you're speaking about kind of quite basic values that we all have, right? But how difficult were there any challenges that you faced in putting that into a book specifically for children? I know obviously I've read the book, and I've obviously the language is very child friendly, but
Yeah.
were there any points where you thought perhaps that maybe would this go over children's heads? Were there any points where you thought actually is this the right story to be telling them, especially because it is for Key Stage 1, as you've said?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, the other day, so I was asked to go to a Godwater and do a story time for younger kids, and I was like, yeah, yeah, and then I was like, is it like, you have that self-doubt, like, is it going to be a good book to read? Like, are the kids going
Yeah,
to get it?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and again, it's about I'm obviously, because I've written the book and I know the meaning behind it. So for me, and then I had to talk myself out. I was like, I can go in there, and I can, even if I have to word
yeah.
a little bit or skip some words out. But
Mm,
the whole point is that what's the meaning of the book? And so the meaning is about the confidence, about the self-belief.
mm,
And children, again, it's about our creative ability. And a lot of us stop that creativity because we're so busy with work, we're so busy with
yeah,
school and just life, and we forget how to be creative. Um, I get a joy of being creative. So for me, it comes quite naturally. Whereas if I'm in a situation and young people are looking at me like, what? It's just about, well, I know what the message is, I know what the meaning is, then how can I just do it in that child-friendly manner? So on the weekend, I actually went to an event. It was World Autism Awareness Day, and so they did an event where we welcomed children with autism and their families. And I read the
right.
book, and before I read the book, I was like, it's not really autism friendly, the book, because there's no props. Yes, there are images, but there are parts of the book that are quite lengthy. So
Right.
I really quite kind of had to reflect, and I was like, is this going to be appropriate for these young
Yeah.
people? And so I read it, and I ended up doing some actions with it. I asked them questions while I was reading it. But the response I got from the young people was absolutely incredible. And I just knew from that on, I was like, if I had children who are struggling with sometimes with communication, with expressing themselves, get it, and they're smiling, and they're like, oh wow, look at that. I was
Yeah.
just like, this is a really good message. And
Yeah.
again, the illustrations are in this book. Whether you don't read the book or not, illustrations in this book explain the message perfectly. This is what I love about the illustrations along with the writing. The illustrations themselves are so powerful, and you don't even have to read the words. Look at the pictures.
Sure.
So
Sure.
if a child is two and they can't read, show them the pictures and then have that conversation. Well, what's happening in this picture? What do you think is happening? And what do you think is happening in that picture? And just yeah. So if you think that your young person might be a bit too young to understand the wording, then the amazing part of this book is that you've got the pictures to be able to work with as well.
Yeah. That reminds you of, you've just mentioned about the event with the autism children. Like when I asked earlier about like if parents are perhaps struggling to get their children to read, obviously reading with their children, but actually, really kind of engaging yourself in that role. So like not just reading the story in a very kind of flat, monotone way,
Yeah,
but perhaps jumping up and you're using your
yeah,
hands and
action.
that I think with children, I see it with my own. That's they laugh at that, and when they
Yeah,
laugh and they smile, they're fully kind of engaged in that moment, and that's where I think the learning then takes place, and that becomes like almost like a core memory, I guess, because you've taken the time out to explain it beyond just the words,
yeah,
and I think children learn in so many different ways. Sometimes I think I certainly from like speak to my friends and who have young children. Um, it's important to recognize that children learn in different ways as well. So
yeah,
for some, it's not, they can't just literally sit there. Again, this book is a little different because there are those pictures, like you've said, but some, like to see those visuals. So I guess the onus is on the parents to, make it a really enjoyable experience,
yeah.
reading.
And what I would recommend is that, before, and it doesn't have to just be this book, it could be any book. As a parent, if you're going to read a book to your children, maybe read it first and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
think of them ideas.
sure, sure.
What I do, every book I read, and sometimes I can see my children looking at me and like, Mummy, why are you being so dramatic? But
Mhm.
I enjoy it because when I read
Yeah,
a book, even when I watch a film, I react so much when I watch a film, and sometimes my husband has to say to me, "Calm down, it's not real."
yeah,
But I books, films, they're created so that we can delve into that world. Sometimes a little bit too much, but with a book, especially when you're reading with children, imagine that this is real life. Imagine you're in the book.
sure.
Imagine that the characters in the book are you, which is
Mhm.
why I think it's so important to have that representation because then it's easier for us to imagine ourselves in that book being that character and then having them emotions with it. But yeah, and this is what I love about the book. And even my children say, they're like, Mummy, when you do story time, can we come and do the actions? So, there's a scene where my daughter's got like a water bottle and she's got to make bubbles, and she's like, "Can I have a glass of water when you're reading, and then I can act it out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like why not? That'd be quite
Yeah,
fun." But it's just
absolutely.
having that time to do that. But again, doing them things, and
Mhm.
again, if your child does have special education needs, and creating that, getting a bottle of water,
Mhm.
or getting them, again, there's another scene where we'll have to try and fly,
Yeah.
um, and so just getting props. And again, like I said, once your children start enjoying something, it'll be really difficult for them to stop.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, definitely trying to be more creative. And again, it brings out the child in us as a parent as well.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. It makes it really, the whole thing is, really enjoyable both for the child and the parent.
Yeah,
Um, just kind of a last question, and because we can wrap up this episode. In terms of, I asked about like challenges with this book, but for yourself as a first-time author, um, any kind of lessons learned that maybe you think would be beneficial to share with perhaps others who are thinking of writing, and what advice would you give them?
yeah. I think for me, I'm not gonna lie, this process has been actually the most sim I thought it'd be really difficult, but it was really simple. Just because one, I followed my intuition. I didn't force this. I didn't think I'm going to be an author. Let me write a
Yeah,
book. It was
sure.
actually the book was written and I was like, oh, I should really try and maybe do something with this.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so for me, it actually worked the other way around.
Okay.
And again, it's just don't be too hard on yourself. Like let things come naturally. Things work
Yeah,
best when it comes naturally because I believe that when things come naturally, there's a reason behind it. Um, and so even for me, like when the name was put on the book, I there was
yeah,
actually a moment where I thought I was going to say to you, can you actually please not add my name because it didn't
yeah,
feel like it was coming. from me. Like it just
Right.
felt really weird. I was just like, this doesn't feel right. And even my daughter, she's like, Mummy, you didn't even write the book. She was like, we wrote the book. Our name should be here. And I was like, actually, you did write
Yeah.
the book.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's how natural it came. Um, but yeah, so just rather than having that that emphasis on I'm going to be an author or I am an author, I need to keep continuing to write books. Just remove that title and just let things like let your creativity flow. Also use the resources around you, like your environment, like so everything that's
Mhm.
happened in the book. My children have experience, like
Right.
they've done them things,
Yeah.
they've struggled with them things, and so it's about really about like just using your real life experiences in your creativity as well.
Yeah.
Um, and also obviously yourself as well. Like I can't tell you enough just how easy you've made this process. People that I spoke to about this book a few years ago, and they're like, "You only spoke about this at the end of the year. How have you got it published?" And I'm like, "Because Khalis House are absolutely amazing. You made the process so simple. The first time I contacted you, and then you sent that form. Before I even looked at the form, I was like, oh gosh, it's going to be really lengthy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to know how to fill in half the columns." But you made it such an easy process. From that moment to getting it printed, I'm just like, yeah, it's just been the most easiest. And it makes you want to do it again. Like it doesn't scare you. I hear some authors, they're like, I'm like, I'm going to write another book.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was such it's such a headache. It was so long. It's so difficult. I'm just like, wow, really? Like I found it really easy. Like I could write another book again, but again, it's just if it
Yeah.
comes to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I can't
Actually,
thank
just
enough.
so Benji, just on that, actually,
Yeah.
are there any upcoming publications in the pipeworks? Is anything maybe a thought, maybe like a sequel or something
Yeah,
different that
I
you?
would love to create a series. So my daughter actually said to me, I want my name on the book. And I said, well, if
Okay.
you want the name on your book, then we've got to work together and create another
Oh,
book. And so
yeah.
she writes books anyway.
Okay.
And I've always said to her, like, you need to write. I actually said to her, you need to write children's books. She's like,
Yeah.
Mummy, then put them on Instagram, put them on YouTube.
Okay.
So she's actually written a book, and it's
Okay.
about forgiveness and love.
Right.
Um, and so I said to her, like, let's work on that, let's build on that. So yes, I'm hoping that in the near future, for me, it's got to come natural.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, if there's a moment that we're together and a book's in the vision, then we'll come. But yes, hopefully, it'd be a shame just to stop at one book. But again, I'm all if it's meant to be, it will be. But
Yeah.
just
No,
watch
I mean,
out.
I say this to all of our authors who are creating, kind of, fictional pieces and even with novels, that there's always scope to have a sequel.
Yeah,
So I think that would be a really good, especially because I do think there are a lot of good children's books available on the market, not just within the sick world, but beyond that. But I do think this, and I'm not just saying it because we're having this conversation or that you've published the College House, but I think this does offer something different because you mentioned earlier about that making it relatable to everyday kind of experiences. That's what this book does in a way which centers the importance of those values of hope and love and working together and helping each other out and
yeah,
gratitude. And I think sometimes uh, books can sometimes be a bit too critical and also and almost make it a bit too kind of bit too fictional. So although these are obviously fictional characters based on your own experiences and
yeah,
obviously your own children, the fact that you've made it relatable to everyday experiences, I think, is what will grasp the children's attention because they'll automatically think, well, actually, perhaps I did think that, or I do
yeah,
think that, and
yeah.
then that's when the learning comes in. So I do think there's scope to create more of these types of books where you take everyday experiences, um, and yes, again, center those important values.
And you know what? I'm happy for anyone who obviously listens to the podcast and they get the book and maybe they are struggling to show that creativity with the book. I'm happy for people to reach out and be like,
Mm.
what kind of props can I use or
Yeah,
how can I show this book how can I connect with this book? How can I help my young people connect to this book and really get the most out of this message? Um, so yeah, definitely do reach out. And already while we're talking, I'm thinking of ideas of what props can
yeah,
be used.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I said, our aim is that it reaches families, it empowers young people, and that connections built. So I'm happy to support that process as well with people.
Awesome, awesome, brilliant. Okay, so just a reminder then for those who are watching. Finding Your Inner Power, and obviously for those who are listening as well, is available to order from khalishouse.com with shipping, worldwide shipping available as well. It came out on the 18th of April, so we're recording this on the 19th, so it's now officially out.
Yes.
So yeah, head over to khalishouse.com to pick up your copies. Erenjit, thank you for taking the time out this morning and joining me on the podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I'm sure we'll stay in touch. But yeah, keep us posted on any upcoming events. I know you mentioned there's a couple happening in Southall
Yeah.
at the
So
Gurdwara.
I'm
Maybe
reaching
just
out to
mention those.
schools as well,
Yeah,
primary schools, whether it's London-based, Midlands-based as well.
yeah,
I am looking at reaching out to schools and just taking myself in and doing storytelling, and again creating them spaces to create them conversations and some creativity for our young people. But yeah, and also if anyone is thinking of getting their book published, definitely reach out to Khalis House, because the process will be so clear, so easy. So yeah, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much, Baji, for everything.
thank you very much. Okay, we'll leave it there for today.
Thank you.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki
Waheguru Ji
Fateh.
Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.